when Dorothy looked me straight in the eye and said, "Arthur has been showing clear signs of dementia and poses a danger to himself and others." I felt something crystallize in my chest like ice forming on a winter pond. I said nothing, but smiled politely at the court-appointed psychiatrist, while my hand moved to the digital recorder in my jacket pocket. By 3:47 p.m. that same day, I had already contacted private investigator Sarah Chun and transferred my entire pension fund to an account Dorothy didn't know existed. And that was only the beginning. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The morning had started so differently. Dorothy had made my favorite blueberry pancakes, the ones with real Maine blueberries that she ordered specially each month. The kitchen smelled like home vanilla, cinnamon, and that particular warmth that comes from 41 years of shared breakfasts. Sunlight streamed through our yellow curtains, the same ones we'd hung in 1983 when we first moved to this house on Elm Street. "Kelly called last night," Dorothy said, flipping a pancake with practiced ease. "She's so grateful for everything we've been doing for little Jamie's therapy. The specialist says he's making real progress." I folded my newspaper, the physical Portland Tribune that I still insisted on getting delivered, and smiled at my wife's back. Even at 62, she still had that graceful way of moving around the kitchen that had first caught my attention at the faculty Christmas party in 1982. $47,000 over 2 years, I said, not complaining, just stating a fact the way I might tell my students about the date of the Battle of Gettysburg. "Worth every penny if it helps Jamie communicate better." Dorothy turned, spatula in hand, and her face held that soft expression I'd fallen in love with decades ago. "You're such a good father, Arthur. And grandfather. Kelly knows how lucky she is." We ate in comfortable silence, occasionally sharing sections of the paper. Dorothy read me a funny story about a cat that had been elected honorary mayor of a small town in Oregon. I told her about a documentary on the History Channel about World War II that I wanted to watch later. Normal Tuesday morning conversation between two people who had built a life together from shared teacher salaries and careful savings. "Oh, I almost forgot," Dorothy said, refilling my coffee cup. "Kelly wants us to come to that family therapy session this afternoon. You know, the one where they're discussing Jamie's treatment plan. She specifically asked for both of us to be there." "Of course," I said, already thinking about how I might contribute. 40 years of teaching had given me insights into different learning styles, and Jamie's autism presented unique challenges that reminded me of some of my most rewarding students. Dr. Morrison said family support was crucial for his development. Dorothy kissed my forehead before clearing the dishes. "We should leave around 2:30. The appointment's at 3. The therapy center was one of those modern buildings with too much glass and not enough character, but I understood why Kelly had chosen it. Dr. Sarah Coleman had an excellent reputation, and the facility specialized in autism spectrum disorders. I'd even done some research on their methodologies, curious about how they differed from the educational approaches I'd used with special needs students. Kelly was waiting in the lobby when we arrived, but something felt different about her demeanor. My daughter, normally chatty and animated, seemed tense. She hugged us both, but her embrace felt perfunctory. "Where's Marcus?" I asked, looking around for my son-in-law. He couldn't make it," Kelly said, not meeting my eyes. "Work emergency. Red flag number 1. In my experience, parents of children with special needs didn't miss therapy sessions for work emergencies. But I filed the observation away, the way I'd learned to do during parent-teacher conferences when something felt off. Dr. Coleman appeared and guided us to a conference room rather than her usual office. Another deviation from normal. The room contained a large table, several chairs, and, I noticed immediately, a recording device that was already running. "Mr. Walsh," Dr. Coleman said, her voice carrying a formality that hadn't been there during our previous meetings. "Thank you for coming. I've asked Kelly and Dorothy to join us today because we need to discuss some concerns that have been brought to my attention." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Dorothy reached over and took my hand, but instead of comfort, her grip felt strategic, positioning. "Concerns?" I asked, my teacher instincts fully activated now. Something was very wrong. Kelly cleared her throat, and when she spoke, her voice shook. "Dad, we love you so much, but lately you've been different, forgetting things, getting confused about dates and places." I stared at my daughter, my mind racing through recent conversations. I hadn't been forgetting anything. I kept detailed records of everything: financial contributions, Jamie's therapy schedules, family events. It was a habit from decades of lesson planning and grade tracking. "Can you give me a specific example?" I asked, using the same calm tone I'd employed with students who were making excuses for missing assignments. Dorothy squeezed my hand tighter. "Arthur, honey, last week you insisted it was 2019. You got very agitated when I corrected you about the date. Lie number 1. We hadn't discussed dates at all last week. And you've been talking to people who aren't there?" Kelly added, tears starting to form in her eyes. "Mom found you having a conversation with your father in the kitchen. Dad, Grandpa died 15 years ago." Lie number 2. I'd been reading aloud from one of my father's old history books, practicing a presentation I was preparing for the local historical society. Dr. Coleman leaned forward, her expression professionally sympathetic. "Mr. Walsh, I'm required to evaluate cognitive function when family members express concerns about safety. Your wife and daughter have provided documentation of incidents that suggest you may be experiencing early-stage dementia." The word hit me like a physical blow. I looked at Dorothy, then at Kelly, then back at Dr. Coleman. 3 women sitting in judgment of my mental capacity based on fabricated evidence. That's when Dorothy delivered the killing blow. "Arthur has been showing clear signs of dementia and poses a danger to himself and others." The room went silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the soft whir of the recording device capturing every word. I felt my heart rate slow, my breathing become deeper, more controlled. It was the same physiological response I'd experienced during the most challenging moments of my teaching career, when parents accused me of unfair grading, when administrators questioned my methods, when the school board tried to eliminate my position during budget cuts. I smiled politely and said nothing. But in that moment, something fundamental shifted inside me, like tectonic plates finding a new equilibrium after decades of pressure. I wasn't angry. Anger was hot and impulsive and led to mistakes. This was something else entirely, a cold, methodical recognition of betrayal that demanded an equally methodical response. My hand moved to the digital recorder in my jacket pocket, a device I'd started carrying 2 weeks earlier when I first noticed the subtle changes in Dorothy and Kelly's behavior. The small red light indicated it was capturing every word of this orchestrated performance. As Dr. Coleman continued her evaluation, asking me questions clearly designed to establish confusion and disorientation, I answered with the precise clarity of a man who had spent 40 years explaining complex historical concepts to teenagers. I named the current president, the date, the season, my address, my social security number. I recited the Gettysburg Address from memory and calculated percentages in my head. But I could see it didn't matter. The decision had already been made. The paperwork was probably already prepared. During the drive home, Dorothy chatted nervously about dinner plans and evening television shows. Kelly had left quickly after the session, claiming she needed to pick up Jamie from school. Neither woman mentioned the devastating accusations they'd just made about my mental health. I said nothing during the 20-minute drive, not because I was confused or disoriented, but because I was calculating. That evening, while Dorothy watched her Tuesday night shows, I sat in my study surrounded by 40 years of careful record-keeping. Bank statements, investment portfolios, pension documentation, insurance policies. Everything we'd built together, everything I'd worked for, everything I'd been systematically giving away to support our daughter and grandson. I looked at the framed photograph on my desk, Dorothy and me on our wedding day, both young teachers excited about building a life together. 41 years. 15,011 days to be exact. I'd calculated it once for our anniversary. But now I was calculating something else entirely. The numbers told a story that made my chest tighten with a cold fury I hadn't felt since discovering that a fellow teacher had been stealing from the Student Activity Fund. Over the past 24 months, I had transferred exactly $47,000 from my pension account to Kelly's joint checking account. Mortgage payments, $1,847 monthly. Jamie's therapy, $380 per session, twice weekly. School supplies, clothing, medical copays. Every dollar carefully tracked and willingly given. This was the same daughter who had just testified to a court-appointed psychiatrist that I was mentally incompetent. This was the same wife who had just provided documentation of my supposed dementia episodes. I opened my laptop and began researching Oregon's laws regarding financial competency and elder abuse. By 2:17 a.m., I had a clear understanding of exactly what Dorothy and Kelly were trying to do. If Dr. Coleman's evaluation supported their claims, they could petition for guardianship, giving Dorothy control over my pension, my investments, my life savings. $47,000 was just the beginning. They wanted it all. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I planned. The next morning, Dorothy made coffee and toast, chatting about her book club meeting and asking if I needed anything from the grocery store. Normal wife behavior, except for the way she avoided direct eye contact and the nervous edge in her voice. "I think I'll visit the library today," I said, buttering my toast with deliberate precision. "Research for that presentation on local Civil War history." Dorothy nodded absently, but I caught the quick glance she shot toward her phone. Checking in with her co-conspirator, most likely. The library was my first stop, but not for historical research. I needed to understand the legal landscape I was navigating. Oregon revised statutes, guardianship procedures, financial elder abuse definitions. I took careful notes in the precise handwriting that had filled thousands of blackboards over the decades. My second stop was the office of attorney Margaret Hayes, a specialist in elder law whom I'd found through the Oregon State Bar website. Margaret was probably 50, with silver hair and the kind of direct gaze that suggested she'd heard every family manipulation story imaginable. "Mr. Walsh," she said after I'd explained my situation, "you're describing a fairly sophisticated scheme. Your wife and daughter are essentially trying to have you declared incompetent so they can control your assets." "That's exactly what they're trying to do," I replied. "The question is, what's the most effective way to stop them?" Margaret leaned back in her chair. "Well, the good news is that you're clearly competent. Your mental acuity is obvious, and you've come to me with detailed documentation and a clear understanding of the legal issues involved. The bad news is that once guardianship proceedings begin, they can be expensive and emotionally devastating to defend." "I'm not interested in defense," I said. "I'm interested in offense." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" I pulled out my digital recorder and played portions of the previous day's therapy session. Dorothy's voice filled the office. "Arthur has been showing clear signs of dementia and poses a danger to himself and others. I've been recording conversations for 2 weeks," I explained. "I have documentation of their planning, their lies, their coordination with each other. I want to know what legal options I have for retaliation." Margaret listened to more of the recording, her expression growing increasingly serious. "Mr. Walsh, this could constitute elder abuse under Oregon law. Financial exploitation, emotional abuse, possibly fraud. Are you interested in pursuing criminal charges?" "I'm interested in justice," I replied. "What would that look like?" Over the next hour, Margaret outlined a strategy that would have made Sun Tzu proud. Oregon's elder abuse statutes included provisions for both criminal prosecution and civil remedies. Financial exploitation was a felony punishable by substantial fines and prison time. More importantly, successful elder abuse claims could result in recovery of triple damages plus attorney fees. "There's something else," Margaret said as our meeting concluded. "Given the amounts involved and the premeditated nature of their scheme, this could also be considered organized financial crime. The penalties become much more severe." My third stop was the office of Certified Public Accountant David Chun, no relation to the private investigator I'd contacted, despite the shared surname. David had handled my taxes for 12 years and knew my financial situation intimately. "Arthur," David said, reviewing my financial statements, "you're in excellent shape for retirement. Your pension is solid, your investments are conservative but growing, and you have minimal debt. Why are you asking about asset protection?" I explained the situation without emotional commentary, presenting facts the way I might outline a historical timeline for my students. David's expression grew increasingly troubled as I detailed Dorothy and Kelly's scheme. "This is financial elder abuse," he said finally. "But you know that, don't you? The question is, what do you want to do about it?" "I want to protect my assets completely," I replied, "and I want to ensure that Dorothy has no legal claim to anything I've earned or saved." David nodded slowly. Oregon is a community property state, but there are exceptions for property acquired before marriage and for certain types of retirement benefits. Your teacher's pension, for instance, is governed by specific statutes that might provide protection. Let me research this. While David researched, I sat in his waiting room and made a list. Not an emotional list of grievances, but a practical accounting of betrayals. Dorothy had provided false testimony to a mental health professional. Kelly had perjured herself regarding my cognitive state. Both had conspired to gain unauthorized control of my finances. The timing suggested long-term planning, not sudden concern for my welfare. Each item represented a specific legal violation with specific remedies. David called me back into his office 45 minutes later with a folder full of documents. "Arthur, I've got good news and bad news. The bad news is that Dorothy does have some community property claims on assets acquired during your marriage. The good news is that your pension and several other assets are protected, and there are legal steps we can take to shield the rest." "What kind of steps?" "Asset protection trusts, beneficiary designations, property transfers. We can make it very difficult for anyone to access your wealth without your explicit consent." "But, Arthur..." David paused, looking uncomfortable. "This will essentially end your marriage. Once Dorothy realizes what you've done, there's no going back." "My marriage ended yesterday," I replied. "I just haven't filed the paperwork yet." That evening, Dorothy was unusually attentive. She made my favorite dinner, pot roast with carrots and potatoes, the meal she'd prepared for my birthday every year since 1983. She asked about my day, complimented a shirt I was wearing, suggested we plan a weekend trip to the coast. Classic manipulation tactics. I'd seen students employ similar strategies when they knew they were in trouble and hoped charm might mitigate the consequences. "How was your day?" I asked, cutting my pot roast with surgical precision. "Oh, the usual. Book club was interesting. We discussed that new novel about marriage secrets. Very enlightening." Dorothy's laugh sounded forced. "Kelly stopped by this afternoon. She's worried about you, Arthur." "We both are." "Worried how?" Dorothy reached across the table and took my hand. "Honey, you've been under so much stress lately. Maybe we should consider getting you checked out by a specialist, just to make sure everything's okay." I looked at my wife of 41 years, this woman who had shared my bed, my dreams, my financial resources, my trust. This woman who was now trying to have me declared mentally incompetent so she could steal my life savings. "What kind of specialist?" I asked. "A geriatrician, maybe. Someone who specializes in age-related changes, memory issues, that sort of thing." I nodded thoughtfully, as if considering her suggestion. "That's a good idea, Dorothy. I'll make some calls tomorrow." But I was already making different calls. That night, while Dorothy slept, I contacted private investigator Sarah Chin. Sarah worked out of a downtown Portland office and specialized in domestic investigations. Her website featured testimonials from divorce attorneys and family law specialists. Our phone conversation was brief and professional. "Mr. Walsh, you mentioned possible financial fraud and conspiracy. Before we proceed, I need to ask, are you considering divorce proceedings?" "I'm considering all legal options," I replied. "I need to know exactly who I'm dealing with and what they've been planning." Standard domestic investigation package includes financial records analysis, communication monitoring, activity surveillance, and background verification. For your situation, I'd recommend comprehensive coverage for at least 2 weeks. That should give us a clear picture of what's happening. Cost: $3,500 for 2 weeks, plus expenses. Full documentation, court-admissible evidence, detailed reporting. When can you start? Tomorrow. While Sarah began her investigation, I launched my own research project. 40 years of teaching had made me an expert at uncovering information, connecting seemingly unrelated facts, and building compelling arguments from evidence. I started with financial records, tracing every transaction from the past 2 years. The $47,000 I'd given Kelly was documented down to the penny, but I discovered something interesting. Several of my contributions had been immediately transferred to a joint account shared by Kelly and Marcus. Money I'd intended for Jamie's therapy was being used for other purposes. Next, I reviewed phone records. Dorothy's cell phone bill showed extensive communication with Kelly during the weeks leading up to the therapy session ambush. Dozens of calls, many lasting 30 to 40 minutes. They'd been planning this systematically. I also found evidence of financial research on Dorothy's laptop. Browser history showed searches for elder care facilities Portland, Oregon, guardianship laws Oregon, and how to prove dementia court. She'd been researching how to have me institutionalized. But the most damaging evidence came from Sarah Chen's investigation. After 1 week of surveillance, she called with an update that changed everything. "Mr. Walsh, I need to meet with you in person. Can you come to my office this afternoon?" Sarah's office was spartanly furnished but organized with military precision. She opened a manila folder and spread photographs across her desk like a poker player revealing a winning hand. The first photograph showed Dorothy entering a hotel on the east side of Portland. The timestamp indicated 2:17 p.m. on a Tuesday, the same Tuesday I'd been at the library researching legal strategies. The second photograph showed Marcus entering the same hotel 14 minutes later. The third photograph showed them leaving together 2 hours and 37 minutes later. "How long has this been going on?" I asked, my voice steady despite the ice spreading through my chest. "Based on the pattern of meetings, probably 8 to 10 months, Sarah replied. "They're very careful, but not careful enough. Different hotels, cash payments, staggered arrivals and departures. But it's definitely systematic." She showed me more photographs, phone records indicating extensive communication between Dorothy and Marcus, credit card receipts for hotels and restaurants. A complete dossier of adultery and deception. "There's something else," Sarah said. "I obtained some of their text message communications through legal channels. They're not just having an affair, Mr. Walsh. They're planning your financial ruin together." She handed me printed screenshots of text conversations between Dorothy and Marcus. The messages were devastating. "Dorothy, Arthur transferred another $3,000 to Kelly's account yesterday. He's so trusting it's almost pathetic. Marcus, once you get guardianship, we can move everything to accounts he can't access. Kelly's worried about the ethics, but she'll go along. Dorothy, the therapist thinks she can get a competency ruling within 2 weeks. Then it's just paperwork. Marcus, what about afterward, when he realizes what happened? Dorothy, the care facility will handle that. He won't be in any position to cause problems." I read the messages twice, processing the cold calculation behind each word. This wasn't impulsive betrayal driven by passion or sudden financial desperation. This was a long-term conspiracy involving my wife, my daughter, and my son-in-law. They were planning to steal my life savings and warehouse me in a care facility while they spent my money. "Mr. Walsh," Sarah said gently, "I know this is difficult to process. Do you want me to continue the investigation?" "Yes," I replied without hesitation. "I want everything. Financial records, communication logs, meeting locations, timeline analysis. Complete documentation. What are you planning to do with this information?" I looked at the photographs spread across Sarah's desk, evidence of betrayal by the 3 people I trusted most in the world. 40 years of teaching had taught me that some lessons could only be learned through consequences. I'm planning to teach them a lesson they'll never forget. The next week unfolded like a carefully orchestrated military campaign. Every morning, Dorothy made breakfast and asked about my plans. Every morning, I told her I was visiting the library or meeting friends for coffee. Every evening, she inquired about my day with the kind of forced concern that made my skin crawl. But while Dorothy thought I was wandering around Portland in a confused haze, I was systematically destroying the foundation of her conspiracy. Monday, I met with attorney Margaret Hayes to review Sarah Chen's evidence and develop a legal strategy. Margaret confirmed that Dorothy's actions constituted multiple felonies under Oregon law: financial exploitation of an elderly person, conspiracy to commit fraud, and filing false statements with a court-appointed professional. Tuesday, I worked with accountant David Chun to restructure my assets, transferring funds to protected accounts and establishing legal barriers to unauthorized access. We created an irrevocable trust for my pension benefits and changed beneficiary designations on all my investments. Wednesday, I visited 3 different banks and opened new accounts that Dorothy couldn't access, transferring the majority of our liquid assets to secure holdings. I also obtained credit reports for Dorothy, Kelly, and Marcus, discovering that Kelly and Marcus had substantial undisclosed debts that explained their desperation for my money. Thursday, I met with Dr. Michael Rodriguez, a forensic psychiatrist who specialized in competency evaluations. Dr. Rodriguez administered a comprehensive cognitive assessment that conclusively proved my mental acuity was well above normal for my age group. He provided written documentation that would demolish any claims of dementia or cognitive impairment. Friday, Sarah Chen delivered her final investigative report, a comprehensive dossier documenting 8 months of adultery between Dorothy and Marcus, plus detailed evidence of their conspiracy to defraud me. The report included photographs, financial records, communication logs, and witness statements that would support both criminal prosecution and civil litigation. By Friday evening, I had assembled an arsenal of evidence and legal weapons that would have impressed the prosecutors at the Nuremberg trials. But I wasn't finished. The best revenge required perfect timing and maximum impact. Saturday morning, Dorothy suggested we visit Kelly and the grandchildren for lunch. "Kelly's been worried about you," she said, using that same concerned tone that now made me physically nauseated. "She thinks some family time might help your condition." "That sounds wonderful," I replied, already knowing exactly what I was going to do. Kelly and Marcus lived in a modest 2-story house in suburban Beaverton, the kind of neighborhood filled with young families and mortgages that stretched budgets to the breaking point. I'd been helping them make those mortgage payments for 2 years, $1,847 per month, willingly given to support my daughter's family. Jamie, my 8-year-old grandson, greeted me with the enthusiastic hug that had always been the purest joy in my visits. His autism made social interaction challenging, but he'd always connected with me through our shared love of history books and maps. "Grandpa Arthur," he shouted, his words carefully articulated through months of speech therapy that I'd been funding. "I learned about the Revolutionary War at school. Did you know Paul Revere was a silversmith?" "I did know that, Jamie," I replied, hugging him tight and feeling a stab of sadness for what was about to happen. "Did you know he made false teeth too?" Marcus appeared from the kitchen, greeting me with the kind of hearty handshake that I now knew was pure performance. This man had been conspiring with my wife to steal my money and institutionalize me. This man who was sleeping with Dorothy while accepting my financial support for his family. "Arthur, good to see you. How are you feeling?" The question carried subtle undertones. "How's your mental health? Are you showing signs of the dementia we're claiming you have? Are you still competent enough to notice we're destroying your life?" "I'm feeling very clear-headed today," I replied, meeting his eyes directly. "More focused than I've been in months." We gathered in the living room, the same room where I'd played with Jamie, helped with homework, shared family stories. Dorothy and Kelly sat on the couch, Marcus in his recliner, me in the chair closest to the front door. Perfect positioning for what was about to happen. The conversation started normally: Jamie's progress in school, Kelly's part-time job, plans for the upcoming holidays. But I could sense the undercurrent of tension, the way Dorothy and Kelly exchanged glances, the way Marcus kept checking his phone. 20 minutes into the visit, Kelly cleared her throat nervously. "Dad, we wanted to talk to you about something important." Here it came, the intervention. The moment when they would present their coordinated concern about my mental health and push for more aggressive medical evaluation. The moment when they would spring their trap. But I was ready with a trap of my own. "Before we discuss anything," I said, reaching into my jacket pocket, "I have something I'd like to share with all of you." I placed my digital recorder on the coffee table and pressed play. Dorothy's voice filled the room, crystal clear and damning. Arthur has been showing clear signs of dementia and poses a danger to himself and others. The color drained from Dorothy's face. Kelly's mouth fell open. Marcus sat forward in his chair, suddenly alert. That's from our therapy session on Tuesday, I explained calmly. Dr. Coleman was recording the session for her files, but I was recording it for mine. I pressed a button and Sarah Chen's voice replaced Dorothy's. I need to meet with you in person. Can you come to my office this afternoon? Another button. Dorothy's text message to Marcus, read aloud by Sarah. Arthur transferred another $3,000 to Kelly's account yesterday. He's so trusting it's almost pathetic. Marcus stood up abruptly. Arthur, I don't know what you think you heard, but sit down, Marcus, I said with the same authority I'd used to control unruly classrooms for 40 years. We're not finished. I pressed another button. Marcus's voice. Once you get guardianship, we can move everything to accounts he can't access. Kelly started crying. Dad, please, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, I replied. You've been conspiring with your mother and your husband to have me declared mentally incompetent so you can steal my pension and life savings. You've provided false testimony to a mental health professional. You've committed multiple felonies under Oregon's elder abuse statutes. I stood up and walked to the mantelpiece, where framed family photographs showed happier times, Kelly's graduation, Jamie's first birthday, Christmas mornings, vacations to the coast. $47,000 in memories and trust, systematically betrayed. Dorothy, I said, turning to face my wife of 41 years. You've been having an affair with Marcus for 8 months. Hotel meetings every Tuesday and Thursday while I was supposedly wandering around in a dementia fog. Dorothy's face went white. Marcus looked like he was going to be sick. Kelly stopped crying and stared at her mother in shock. That's not true, Dorothy whispered, but her voice carried no conviction. I reached into my other jacket pocket and pulled out Sarah Chen's photographs, spreading them across the coffee table like evidence exhibits in a courtroom. Dorothy entering the hotel. Marcus following 14 minutes later. Both of them leaving together. The Marriott on Burnside, the Hampton Inn on Powell, the Holiday Inn near the airport, I recited. 8 months of documented adultery while you plan to steal my money and commit me to a care facility. The silence in the room was absolute except for Jamie's voice from upstairs, where he was playing with his toys, blissfully unaware that his family was disintegrating. Kelly found her voice first. Mom, is this true? Dorothy couldn't meet her daughter's eyes. Marcus had slumped back in his recliner, his face buried in his hands. Kelly, I said gently, your mother and your husband have been planning this together. The competency evaluation, the guardianship petition, the financial control, it was never about concern for my health. It was about access to my money. I showed her more text messages, more photographs, more evidence of the conspiracy that had been unfolding around her. Kelly read each document with growing horror, realizing that her husband and mother had manipulated her into participating in elder abuse. I want you all to understand something, I said, my voice carrying the absolute calm that comes with complete moral clarity. As of yesterday, you have no access to any of my financial accounts. My pension has been placed in an irrevocable trust. My investments have been transferred to protected holdings. My will has been updated to exclude anyone who participated in this conspiracy. Dorothy finally looked at me, and for the first time in months, I saw the real woman behind the performance. Desperate, caught, cornered. Arthur, please, we can work this out. It was never supposed to go this far. We were just worried about your future, about making sure you were taken care of. Stop, I said firmly. Don't compound fraud with more lies. I walked back to the coffee table and gathered up the photographs and documents. Margaret Hayes, my attorney, has copies of everything. Dr. Michael Rodriguez has provided documentation of my complete mental competency. Sarah Chen's investigative report establishes a clear pattern of conspiracy and fraud. Marcus finally looked up. What are you going to do? I'm going to let you live with the consequences of your choices, I replied. Kelly, you can decide whether you want to save your marriage or not. That's between you and Marcus. But you should know that your husband has been stealing money intended for Jamie's therapy to fund his affair with your mother. The explosion was immediate. Kelly launched herself at Marcus, screaming questions and accusations. Dorothy tried to intervene, which only intensified Kelly's fury when she realized her mother was defending Marcus instead of apologizing to her daughter. I walked out of their house while they were still screaming at each other. That afternoon, I moved out of the home I'd shared with Dorothy for 38 years. I took my clothes, my books, my teaching materials, and my dignity. I left behind 4 decades of shared possessions and a marriage that had been murdered by greed and betrayal. I rented a small apartment near Portland State University, close enough to hear the energy of students and professors, far enough from Elm Street to start fresh. For the first time in 41 years, I was accountable to no one but myself. The legal proceedings unfolded with mathematical precision over the following months. Dorothy filed for divorce, claiming irreconcilable differences. I counterfiled with evidence of adultery and conspiracy to commit elder abuse. Margaret Hayes prosecuted the case with the thoroughness of a Supreme Court argument. Marcus lost his job when HR discovered he'd been embezzling client funds to pay for his affair expenses, hotel rooms, dinners, gifts for Dorothy. Kelly filed for divorce and moved back in with Dorothy, but their relationship was poisoned by mutual recrimination and shattered trust. The financial settlements were brutal but fair. Dorothy received minimal alimony and no access to my pension or investments. Marcus faced both criminal charges and civil liability for his role in the conspiracy. Kelly kept the house but lost my financial support, forcing her to find full-time employment for the first time since Jamie's birth. But the most satisfying justice was watching their relationships destroy themselves. Dorothy and Marcus's affair couldn't survive the exposure and scandal. Kelly couldn't forgive either of them for manipulating her into betraying me. The conspiracy that was supposed to make them all wealthy instead left them isolated, financially damaged, and legally vulnerable. 6 months later, I was sitting in a coffee shop near the university when Kelly approached my table. She looked older, worn down by single parenthood and the stress of full-time work. But there was something different in her posture, a maturity that hadn't been there before. "Dad?" she said hesitantly. "Could we talk?" I gestured to the empty chair across from me. Kelly sat down carefully, as if afraid I might change my mind and leave. "I've been wanting to apologize for months," she began, her words coming in a rush. "I never understood what Mom and Marcus were really doing. I genuinely thought you were showing signs of dementia. I was scared and confused, and I let them manipulate me into something horrible. I listened without interruption, the way I'd learned to listen to students who needed to confess academic dishonesty or personal problems. I divorced Marcus," she continued, "and I've cut off contact with Mom. I can't forgive what they did to you, and I can't forgive myself for going along with it." "Kelly," I said gently, "you were a victim too. They exploited your love for me and your concern for Jamie's future. That doesn't excuse your participation, but it explains it." Tears started flowing down her cheeks. "I miss you so much, Dad. Jamie asks about you constantly. He doesn't understand why Grandpa Arthur stopped visiting." The mention of my grandson hit me like a physical blow. Jamie had been the innocent casualty of this entire disaster, losing his grandfather's presence because of his parents' and grandmother's greed. "How is Jamie doing?" I asked. "Struggling," Kelly admitted. "Without your financial help, I had to cut back on his therapy sessions. He's regressed in some areas. But Dad, I'm not asking for money. I'm asking for forgiveness. And maybe a chance to rebuild some kind of relationship." I studied my daughter's face, looking for signs of manipulation or deception, but I saw only genuine remorse and exhaustion. Kelly had learned a hard lesson about the cost of betrayal, and she was paying that cost every day. "Forgiveness is possible," I said finally. "Trust will take longer to rebuild. But Kelly, if you ever participate in anything like this again—" "Never," she said.